It was a gray November day, and I felt sad. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, poring over old photographs and looking out at the rain-drenched street. It had been 5 years since Harold had been gone, 5 long years in this big house, where every corner reminded me of our 42 years together. My name is Viola Morrow, 74 years old, and I've decided to sell the house I've lived in most of my life. This decision has been ripe for a long time, but only now have I found the strength to take this step. There are too many memories, too much emptiness. Harold always said that our home is our fortress. Now that fortress had become too big for a lonely old woman. I put the photo album aside and picked up the phone. I needed to call Renee, my only daughter, and let her know of my decision. I knew she wouldn't take the news well. Mom, are you sure? Her voice sounded worried. This is your home with Dad for so many years. That's why, dear, I tried to say calmly. There's too much of him here and too little of me. I need to move on. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost see Renee biting her lip, a habit from childhood when she was nervous or unsure of what to say. Boyd thinks it's a good idea, she said finally. He says real estate's going up in value right now. But where will you go? Oh, Boyd, my brother-in-law always had an opinion on everything, especially when it came to money. In the 20 years he's been married to my daughter, I've never been able to sympathize with him. Pompous, self-righteous, and completely clueless about finances, despite his loud claims to the contrary. I've seen a small apartment in Pinewood Gardens, I said. It's quiet, has a park nearby, and a good medical center. It's perfect for a woman my age. But it's an expensive neighborhood. There was a note in Renee's voice that I knew well, a mixture of distrust and envy. Don't worry, honey. The house is worth enough for me to afford a comfortable old age, and there will still be enough left over to help you. I heard my daughter's breathing quicken. Money had always been a sensitive issue for her. Renee had worked for the insurance company for 15 years, but her paycheck was barely enough to support the lifestyle Boyd thought she needed. And his perpetual business ideas only made their financial situation worse. Did she? Her voice rose higher with excitement. You want to help us? I sighed. Of course I wanted to help. She's my daughter. But I also knew that any financial help would likely be squandered by Boyd on another dubious scheme. Yes, Renee, but not all of it. I'm keeping most of it for myself. Medical expenses, emergencies. You realize, at my age. Of course, Mom, of course, she agreed hastily, but I could feel her disappointment. After the call, I sat for a long time, looking at the picture of Harold and me, standing in front of this very house on the day we bought it. Young, full of hope. He worked as a chemical engineer in a factory, and I taught chemistry at a local college. We both came from middle-class families and earned everything we had through hard work. Unlike Boyd, he was always looking for the easy way out. He worked as a realtor until he had a falling out with his boss, then started his own business, an event management company that was barely making ends meet. Harold never trusted him. He talks about money he hasn't made and success he hasn't achieved, my husband once said, and I couldn't agree more. But Renee loved him. Quiet, accommodating, always avoiding conflict. She let her husband make all the decisions and believed every word he said. Sometimes I wondered how my daughter could be so different from me. I always voiced my opinion, even if it was unpopular. Perhaps that's why Harold respected me so much despite our differences. Our granddaughter, Perry, was the exact opposite of her mother. In her 19 years, she was already demonstrating character and independence of thought. She studied psychology in college and seemed to have truly found her calling. I was proud of her. A week after my conversation with Renee, I met with a real estate agent. A middle-aged woman with a professional smile and a keen eye, she inspected the house and quoted an amount that made me raise my eyebrows in surprise. Are you sure? I asked. More than sure, Mrs. Morrow, she nodded. Your neighborhood has become very desirable in recent years. Plus, the house is in excellent condition. I think we'll sell it very quickly. I didn't mention that Harold spent every weekend fixing things up, remodeling, improving. This house was his passion. That's probably why it was so hard for me to sell it. That same evening, Renee arrived. Alone, which surprised me because Boyd usually didn't miss an opportunity to poke his nose into our family affairs. How'd the meeting with the agent go? She asked, helping me make dinner. Renee had never been a good helper in the kitchen. The vegetables she cut were always different sizes, and she added salt by eye, which often ended in disaster. But I appreciated her company. All right, I replied with restraint. The house is worth more than I expected. Renee froze with the knife in her hand. Really? How much? I named the amount, and my daughter's eyes widened. Wow, Mom, that's a lot of money. I shrugged. It's a fair price for 40 years of living with your father. Renee bit her lip and looked away. I knew that gesture. She wanted to say something but didn't dare. What is it, dear? Nothing, it's just. She hesitated. Boyd said if we had that kind of money, we could expand the business. He found a great space downtown for a new office. I felt my insides clench. This is it. Renee, I put my hand on her shoulder. I already said I'd help you, but most of the money will go to provide for my old age. I can't give it all away. Of course, Mom, she agreed quickly. I'm just daydreaming out loud. But I could see the disappointment in her eyes, and I knew this conversation wasn't over. Over dinner, we talked about Perry, about her academic progress, about her new friends. Renee always perked up when we talked about her daughter. It was the only subject she felt comfortable talking about without regard for her husband's opinion. She's so much like you, Renee said with a slight smile. Just as stubborn and independent. I laughed. Is that a compliment? Of course. Renee turned serious for a moment. I've always admired your strength, Mom. You never let anyone tell you how to live your life. I felt an unexpected warmth. Renee rarely said things like that. Thank you, dear. But sometimes I wish I'd been gentler, especially with you. She shook her head. No, you were a wonderful mother, strict but fair. We were silent, each of us in our own thoughts. I thought about my daughter's life, about her choice of a life partner that I didn't think brought her true happiness, her inability to resist his influence, her financial hardship as a result of his reckless decisions. How are you doing financially? I asked bluntly, breaking the silence. Just be honest, Renee. She flinched as if I'd hit her. All right, she answered too quickly. Boyd says the company's doing well. Have you seen the financials? Renee lowered her eyes. No, but he said, Renee, I interrupted her gently but firmly. You need to know what's going on with your finances. It's your life, your safety. I know, Mom. Her voice became barely audible. But Boyd doesn't like me getting involved in the company. He says I wouldn't understand anyway. I felt anger boiling up inside me. Typical Boyd, convincing my daughter of her incompetence so he can control her completely. It's not true, and you know it, I said firmly. You're a smart woman, Renee. You can handle any kind of numbers if you want to. She smiled weakly, but didn't say anything back. We finished dinner in silence. As Renee got ready to leave, I hugged her tighter than usual. I love you, daughter, and I want you to be happy. I know, Mom, she replied. I love you too. After she left, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about our conversation. I knew Renee would tell Boyd every word I said about selling the house. I knew he was already making plans for the money, and I knew I had to be very careful. Not that I didn't want to help my daughter. Of course I did. But I also knew that any large sum of money that fell into Boyd's hands would quickly evaporate in another failed business venture. And at my age, I couldn't afford to be destitute. I needed to ensure a comfortable old age. Medical bills, nursing care, unexpected expenses, all of it required money. Money that Harold and I had saved all our lives, saving for a rainy day. I couldn't afford the luxury of recklessness. That night, I dreamed of Harold. He was sitting in his office, surrounded by papers and bills, as he had often been in his lifetime. "Don't let him take it all away, Vi," he said, using the pet nickname only he called me. "You deserve a peaceful old age." I woke up with a sense of determination. Harold was right. I deserved a peaceful old age, and I would do anything to provide it, even if it meant confronting my own daughter and her husband. The house began to empty. Each day I packed, sorting my belongings into those I would take with me to my new apartment, those I would give to Renee, and those I would have to sell or give to charity. Each item held a memory, and sometimes I would freeze with an item in my hands, immersed in the past. Here are the blue-rimmed plates, a wedding gift from Harold's parents. We served our first family dinner on them. Here is the mineral collection that Harold collected throughout his life. Each stone had its own story, its own root, and its own place in our lives. And here is the old rocking chair where I breastfed newborn Renee and sang lullabies to her. I've decided that rocking chair is something I will definitely take with me. Some things are too precious to part with. The real estate agent was right. The house attracted interest from several buyers at once. 2 weeks after the ad was placed, I already had 3 offers. One of them, from a young couple with a small child, was particularly attractive. They offered even a little more than the asking price. "They really like your house, Mrs. Morrow," the agent said over the phone. They could put down a deposit as early as next week. I agreed, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. This house would soon be home to a new family. They will create their memories here, fill it with their joys and sorrows. Life goes on. That same evening, Renee called. "Mom, Boyd and I want to come over tomorrow. We're going to help you pack." That was unusual. Boyd had rarely been to my house in recent years, preferring to stay home when Renee visited. But I agreed, an extra set of hands couldn't hurt. They arrived at 6 p.m. sharp. Boyd was unusually lively and friendly. He started helping with the boxes right away, complimenting me on my house. "Amazing place, Viola," he said, lifting a heavy box of books. "I've always admired the taste with which you and Harold decorated this space." I nodded silently, watching his sudden enthusiasm with slight disbelief. Boyd had never been particularly eager to help others unless there was a direct benefit to himself. "I hear you've already got buyers," he said casually over dinner. "Renee says they're offering a great price." "Yes," I said discreetly. "A young family. They have a young son." "Fine, fine." Boyd smiled, but his eyes remained cold and calculating. "So you'll soon have a tidy sum in your account." I felt Renee tense beside me. She was always nervous when money was involved. "Yes," I said, sipping my tea, "but most of it will go toward buying a new apartment and providing for my old age." Of course, of course," Boyd agreed hastily, but I could see that his smile was a little strained. "But still, I think there'll be a fair amount left over. You know, I've been thinking about some interesting investment opportunities. I could tell you about them. For your own benefit, of course. This is it," I thought. "Here we go." "Thank you for the offer, Boyd," I tried to say neutrally, "but I've already decided what I'm going to do with my funds." "And how would you do that?" He leaned forward, not hiding his interest. "Some of it will go toward a new apartment, some of it will go toward health insurance, and the rest I'll put into an account with a good interest rate. Nothing risky." I paused, And of course, I'll set aside some money for you and Renee. Oh, Mom, thank you, Renee said immediately, but Boyd interrupted her. Viola, I don't mean to be impolite, but bank interest is practically negligible these days. Inflation will eat up all your savings in a few years, and I could help you really grow those funds. His tone became more insistent, almost aggressive. I noticed Renee squirming in her chair, clearly uncomfortable. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. My company is on the verge of a big expansion. Boyd's eyes lit up with that special sparkle he always had when he talked about his business ideas. We can rent space in the business center, hire more staff, launch a new line of services. In a year, two at most, we will increase turnover 3 or 4 times. Your investment will bring excellent profits. I stared at my son-in-law, trying to figure out if he really believed what he was saying or if he was just looking for an easy way to get access to my money. Boyd, I began softly, your company has been around for 5 years, but as far as I can tell, it hasn't turned a significant profit. His face changed instantly, hard and cold. It's a business, Viola. It takes time to turn a profit. Not everyone can work a steady government job with a guaranteed pension like you and Harold. Boyd, Renee exclaimed, don't talk to your mom like that. It's all right, dear. I put my hand on my daughter's shoulder. Boyd has a right to his opinion, but I have a right to use my money as I see fit. That was the end of the conversation, but I had a feeling it was just the beginning. Boyd was not one to back down easily, especially when it came to money. In the weeks that followed, Renee and Boyd began to visit me with surprising regularity. They brought groceries, helped with packing, offered to drive me wherever I needed to go. Boyd even fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, a thing he'd been putting off for years, always finding excuses. Their sudden helpfulness was too obvious for me to ignore. But I let it go on, partly because I really needed the help, partly because I hoped that behind the ostentatious attention lurked genuine concern. One day, while tearing through the garage, Boyd came across Harold's old vinyl record collection. Wow, there's some real treasures in here, he said, thumbing through the albums. Some of these are worth a lot of money to collectors now. Really? I stepped closer. Harold never collected them for their value. He just loved music. Well, now they can be useful. Boyd pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of the covers. I know a couple places where I can sell them for a bargain. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with the records yet, I said softly but firmly. Boyd gave me a surprised look. You're not going to listen to them. You don't even have a record player. That's not the point. I picked up one of the albums. Duke Ellington, Harold's favorite jazz man. They have sentimental value to me. Boyd shrugged, but I could see the irritation on his face. He always took it badly when someone disagreed with his suggestions. That same evening, when Boyd went out for cigarettes, a habit he kept from Renee, my daughter came over to my couch and took my hand. Mom, she began quietly, I wanted to talk to you about the money from the sale of the house. I felt my insides tighten, but I tried not to show it. Of course, dear. What exactly are you interested in? Renee swallowed nervously. Boyd thinks you could trust him with a large sum of money to invest in his business. He says it would benefit us all in the long run. I looked at my daughter carefully. What do you think, Renee? She lowered her eyes. I trust Boyd in financial matters. He always says he has a plan. A plan is good, I said slowly, choosing my words. But sometimes plans don't work out. What then? Boyd says it'll work this time. She sounded so desperately hopeful it hurt. He's got connections, potential clients. He just needs some seed money. I sighed. Renee had always believed Boyd, despite all his past failures. She'd believed him when he'd invested their savings in his buddy's restaurant business, which went under 6 months later. Believed when he convinced her to take out a second mortgage to invest in a cryptocurrency that devalued after a month. Believed when he assured her that his company was about to turn a serious profit, a promise he'd been making for 5 years. Renee, I tried to speak softly. I can't give all my money to Boyd's business. I have to think about my future. But Mom, her voice trembled, we could take care of you if the business started to turn a profit. You could live with us. I shook my head. Honey, I love you and Boyd, but I want to keep my independence for as long as possible. It's important to me. Renee looked upset, but didn't insist. When Boyd returned, she quickly changed the subject, but I noticed him cast a questioning look at her, and she shook her head faintly. Apparently, he had instructed her to talk to me, and was now unhappy with the result. The next day, Perry arrived. She visited me less often than I would have liked because college and her part-time job were taking up a lot of my time, but every visit was a real treat for me. Grandma, she hugged me from the doorstep. You look beautiful. You too, dear. I looked at her with pride. Tall, slender, with lively green eyes and a confident posture, she reminded me more and more of my younger self. We settled in the backyard, under an old apple tree that Harold had planted 30 years ago. I made tea and pulled out the cookies Perry had loved since she was a child. How's the house sale going? She asked, taking a bite of the cookie. It's almost finalized, I replied. The young family had put down a deposit, and now the lawyers were doing the paperwork. It should be official in 2 weeks. Perry nodded. Where are you moving to? Pinewood Gardens. I've already put a down payment on a small apartment. It's a nice neighborhood, Perry said approvingly. It's quiet, safe, and there's a medical center nearby. Wise decision, Grandma. I smiled. My granddaughter always had a knack for seeing the practical side of things. Your parents have been frequent visitors lately, I said, watching her reaction. They've been very helpful with packing. Perry frowned and set the cookies aside. Grandma, she began seriously, there's something I need to tell you about Daddy. I tensed. Something in her tone made me uneasy. What is it, honey? Perry took a deep breath. I overheard him talking on the phone a few days ago. He was talking to some man about debts. Big debts. I felt my heart skip a beat. What kind of debts? I'm not sure, but it sounds like Dad borrowed money from some not-so-nice people for business, and now they're demanding repayment. Perry spoke quietly, like she was afraid we might be overheard. He told this man that he was about to get a big payday, that his mother-in-law was selling the house and would share the money. I closed my eyes for a moment. That's what this is about. That's why Boyd was suddenly so obliging. That's why Renee was so insistent that I invest in his business. Grandma, Perry took my hand. Please be careful. I know Dad can be very persuasive when he wants to be, but that money is your safety. Don't let him take it away. I squeezed my granddaughter's hand tightly. Don't worry, dear. I'm not as naive as I may seem. I know, she smiled weakly. But I'm still worried. Dad's been kind of jumpy. Jumpy. I've never seen him like that before. That didn't surprise me. If Boyd really owed money to some shady characters, he had every reason to be nervous. Did Mama know? I asked. Perry shook her head. I don't think so. She's always trying to stay out of trouble, especially when it comes to Dad. But she's been tense lately, too. We sat in silence, staring at the old apple tree, whose branches rustled quietly in the light wind. That apple tree had seen Renee grow up, how she had played in this orchard, how she had brought home her first boyfriend, how she had introduced Boyd to Harold and me. How often I've stood under that tree, watching my daughter and thinking that she deserves better than this cocky man with grandiose plans and minimal accomplishments. What are you going to do, Grandma? Perry finally asked. What I've been planning all along, I answered. Buy an apartment, live a comfortable old age, and help your family to a reasonable extent. But Daddy's going to insist on more, Perry warned me. I know, honey, I stroked her arm. But it's my money, and I'll decide what I want to do with it. Perry looked worried, but nodded. Just be prepared for him to be very persistent, and Mom will probably side with him. Like always, I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. She loves him, Perry said quietly. No matter what. I know, I sighed, and I respect her choice, but that doesn't mean I should let him handle my money. Perry looked at her watch and sighed. I've got to go, Grandma. I have an evening shift at the cafe. Of course, dear. I got up to see her off. Thank you for stopping by, and thanks for the warning. She hugged me tightly, almost desperately. Just take care of yourself, okay? And call me every day. I want to know you're okay. I promise, I kissed her cheek. Don't worry about me, Perry. I can take care of myself. After my granddaughter left, I sat in the garden for a long time, thinking about our conversation. So, Boyd's in debt, and he's counting on my money to pay them off. No wonder he's suddenly so attentive and caring. It got me thinking about Renee. Did she know about her husband's debts? Or was he hiding it from her, as he probably hid many other things? My daughter had always preferred not to see the unpleasant truth, especially when it came to Boyd. But I'm not like that. I face the truth no matter how unpleasant it is. And right now, the truth was that I needed to be very careful with the money from the house sale. Very careful and very firm. I wouldn't let Boyd take what Harold and I had saved up all our lives. I won't let him squander that money to pay off debts he's made because of his own rash decisions. That money is my insurance, my security, my independence, and I would do anything to keep it, even if I had to confront my own daughter and her husband. With these thoughts in mind, I returned to the house that would soon no longer be mine and continued packing. Each box, each item stacked inside, was a step toward a new life. A life I intended to live on my terms, not Boyd Hayworth's. The day of signing the papers came suddenly, even though I'd been preparing for it for weeks. The sun was shining brightly, as if blessing my transition to a new life. I wore my best suit, the navy blue one with the pearl brooch Harold had given me for our 35th anniversary. I wanted to look put together and elegant so the buyers would know they were getting a home from people who respected and cared for it. The young couple, Edith and Stuart Pritchard, looked excited and happy. Their young son, a 4-year-old boy with bright blue eyes, ran around the garden, already thinking it was his own. I'm sorry about Liam, Edith said with embarrassment as we sat at the notary's desk, preparing to sign the papers. He was so excited about the move. It's okay, I smiled at her. The kids need space. This house has plenty of it. We're planning a nursery on the second floor, in the room overlooking the apple tree, Stuart said. Edith is pregnant, and we'll have another baby in 7 months. Congratulations. I felt a slight sadness. Harold and I were once a young couple with big plans, moving into our first home. Now it was their turn to create happiness there. This is the perfect room for a nursery. There is always plenty of sunshine in there in the morning. The process of signing the documents was quick and businesslike. The notary, a middle-aged woman with attentive eyes, patiently explained each item. Finally, everything was ready. I put the last signature and the house was officially no longer mine. The money will be deposited into your account within 3 business days, Mrs. Morrow, the notary said. But you can also get a bank check right now if you prefer. I chose the check, though I planned to deposit it into my account right away. There was some symbolism in holding in my hands a material embodiment of the value of the house in which most of my life had been spent. We exchanged handshakes with the Pritchards, and I handed them the keys to the house. Be happy in it, I said sincerely. Thank you, Mrs. Morrow. Edith hugged me unexpectedly. We will keep the spirit of this house alive. I went back to the house that wasn't my own anymore to pick up the last of my belongings, a few boxes of personal items that hadn't fit the last time I'd moved in. Most of my stuff was already in the new apartment I'd bought 2 weeks ago, paying the full amount all at once, with no mortgage. Standing in the empty living room, I allowed myself a moment of nostalgia. So many memories these walls held. The first day Harold and I stepped over the threshold as owners. Renee's first steps, her graduation, our holiday dinners. The quiet evenings when Harold read in his chair and I knitted by the fireplace. Goodbye, I said quietly, speaking not to the walls, but to the spirit of the house, a memory that would stay with me wherever I lived. On my way out, I didn't look back. Some chapters need to be closed with determination. On the way to the bank, I called Renee. It's all set, I said. The house was officially sold. Congratulations, Mom. I could hear the excitement in her voice. Boyd and I want to take you out to dinner tonight, to celebrate. I thought for a moment. After talking to Perry, I planned to process the money transfer at the bank and then move into the new apartment right away. Meeting Boyd wasn't part of my plan. I don't know, honey. I've got so much to do. Please, Mom. Her voice was pleading. It's important to us. We want to talk about the future, your future. Something in her tone made me wary. Too insistent, too desperate. Okay, I finally agreed. What time? 6 p.m. at our place. After hanging up, I changed my route. Instead of going to my usual bank, I went to another bank in the neighborhood, where I had an account that neither Renee nor Boyd knew about. Harold had always been a prudent man. Never put all your eggs in one basket, V, he liked to say. At his insistence, we opened several accounts at different banks to diversify our savings. After his death, I maintained this practice. At the bank, I met with the manager, with whom I had previously agreed by phone. He was already waiting for me, ready to help me with the deposit. Mrs. Morrow, good to see you, he greeted me. Everything is ready for the deposit. I deposited most of the money I'd received for the house. I decided to keep a third of it in another account, which I planned to offer to Renee to pay off their mortgage. Not to Boyd for his questionable business, but specifically to pay off the debt on their house. Now I need a check for that amount. I told the manager a third of the money I'd received for the house. In the name of my daughter, Renee Hayworth. When all the formalities were completed, I called my lawyer, an older man who had handled my and Harold's affairs for many years. Mr. Foley, the deal is done, I said. I've followed all the recommendations as we discussed. Most of the money is in a safe account. That's good, Mrs. Morrow. His voice sounded approving. What about the part you wanted to offer your daughter? I've prepared a check, but under the circumstances, I remembered Perry's warning. I'd like you to prepare paperwork to ensure that the money is used to pay off their mortgage and not something else. A reasonable precaution, the lawyer agreed. I'll have the documents ready by tomorrow morning. After I finished talking, I went home to Renee and Boyd. On the way, I thought about the conversation I was about to have. It was clear to me that Boyd would insist on getting most of the money for his business. I also realized that Renee would likely support her husband, as she always did. But I was prepared for this confrontation. Renee and Boyd's house was beautiful on the outside, but the inside felt somewhat neglected. Minor repairs that kept getting put off, worn furniture that was long overdue for replacement. Further evidence of the financial difficulties Boyd was trying so hard to hide. Mom, Renee greeted me at the door with feigned enthusiasm. Come on in, we're all set. Boyd stood in the living room with a glass of whiskey in his hand, smiling his trademark salesman's smile that never reached his eyes. Viola, he walked over and hugged me awkwardly. Congratulations on a successful sale. Have a seat, please. Something to drink? A little white wine, if you have it. I sat down in the chair, trying to look relaxed. Dinner had been prepared with obvious care. Renee wasn't an outstanding cook, but tonight she'd outdone herself. Baked fish, potato gratin, fresh salad. Everything was delicious and beautifully served. The conversation at the table at first revolved around neutral topics: my new apartment, Perry's studies, the latest city news. But I could feel the tension building, especially from Boyd, who was drinking more than usual and often glanced quickly at my bag, where the bank check was. Finally, when dessert was served, a store-bought cheesecake, Boyd's favorite, he coughed and got down to business. So, Viola, his voice sounded businesslike, Renee and I would like to discuss financial matters with you. I nodded, ready for this conversation. Of course, Boyd. As you know, my company is on the verge of a major expansion. He pushed back the plate of dessert. But that requires investment, serious investment. And you think I should provide that investment? I said it affirmatively, not as a question. I think it would be beneficial to all of us. Boyd smiled, but his eyes remained cold. My business plan is very solid. In a year, 2 at the most, you'll get the full amount back with good interest. Renee sat next to me, nervously rubbing her napkin. I could see she was tense to the max. Boyd, I said calmly, I've already decided what I'm going to do with the money from the sale of the house. I've put most of it aside for my own needs, medical expenses, emergencies. But I pulled a check out of my bag. I want to offer this amount to you and Renee to pay off your mortgage. I put the check on the table. Boyd stared at it, and his face changed when he saw the amount. It's it's only a third of what you got for the house. His voice shook with barely contained anger. Yes, I confirmed, and it's enough to pay off your mortgage in full. You won't have that monthly burden anymore. Think how much easier your life will be. But my business, Boyd began. Your business has been around for 5 years, I interrupted him, and in that time, it's never made a substantial profit. I can't risk my life savings on another one of your business ideas, Boyd. His face has turned purple. So you don't believe in me? You don't believe I can succeed? It's not about faith, Boyd, I said softly but firmly. It's about facts. And the facts are that your business is unprofitable. Renee jumped up from her seat. Mom, please. Boyd works so hard. He deserves a chance. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve a chance, Renee. I looked at my daughter. I'm saying I can't risk all my savings for this chance. What about us? Renee's eyes filled with tears. Don't we deserve financial stability? That's why I'm offering to pay off your mortgage. I pointed to the check. It will give you stability. You won't risk losing the roof over your head anymore. Boyd suddenly pounded his fist on the table, making us both wince. God damn it, Viola. His voice rose to a shout. You don't need that money. You're an old woman. How long do you have left? 5 years? 10? We got our whole lives ahead of us. Perry's got school, we got debts. What debts, Boyd? I asked him quietly, looking him straight in the eye. The ones you told Renee about or the ones you didn't tell her about? He froze, a look of confusion on his face. I don't know what you mean. I think you understand perfectly well. I didn't look away. Debts to people who aren't particularly patient when it comes to getting their money back. Renee shifted her gaze between us, clearly not understanding what we were talking about. What? What debts? Boyd, what's she talking about? But Boyd wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the check on the table. In a sudden movement, he grabbed it and got to his feet. To hell with this, he shouted, waving the check. Our family needs this money more. I won't let you withhold it when we can barely make ends meet. Renee looked shocked. Boyd, please calm down. No, he almost growled. I've endured her scorn for years, her judgmental looks. She always thought I wasn't good enough for you, for her precious daughter. And now, when she has the opportunity to help us, she's offering me crumbs. He turned to me, face contorted with anger. Is that all you think of us, Viola? That we deserve only crumbs from your table? I looked calmly at my angry son-in-law. You can keep that check, Boyd, I said quietly. Only it's not worth anything. He froze, not understanding. What? I already called the bank and canceled it. I stood up, feeling strangely calm. The money from the sale of the house is already in my personal account, which you don't know about, and I'll write a new check in Renee's name, but only on the condition that it goes solely to pay off your mortgage, not to your shady business ideas or to pay off your creditors. Boyd's face turned white. He stared at the check in his hand as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You, you can't. I can, Boyd. I stepped closer. And I know about your debts. I know that you borrowed money from people you'd rather not do business with. I know you kept it from Renee, and I know you were counting on my money to pay them off. Renee looked from me to her husband, stunned. Boyd, what is she talking about? Do we have debts I don't know about? Boyd was silent, still clutching the useless check in his hand. Tell her, Boyd, I demanded. Tell her the truth. Tell her your company's on the verge of bankruptcy. Tell her you put a second mortgage on the house to cover the losses. Tell her you've borrowed money from people who will stop at nothing to get it back. Renee turned pale. Is that true? Her voice was barely audible. Boyd finally slumped down in his chair as if all the air had been let out of him. You don't understand, he muttered. I was doing it for us, for our future. By mortgaging our house without my knowledge? Renee's voice shook. By borrowing from some dangerous people? Was it for our future? I watched reality crash down on my daughter. Years of self-deception, years of blind faith in her husband were crumbling before her eyes. Renee, I put my hand on my daughter's shoulder. I still want to help you with the mortgage, but I can't let Boyd squander that money to pay off the debts he's made because of his irresponsibility. Boyd suddenly jumped up again, his face twisted with rage. You old witch, he shouted. You always tried to turn Renee against me, always thinking I wasn't good enough for her. No, Boyd, I shook my head. I always wanted Renee to be happy, and if you made her happy, I'd accept you, despite all your faults. But you make her unhappy. You lie to her. You hide the truth from her. You jeopardize your family for your ambition. Renee stood between us, tears streaming down her face. Stop, she whispered. Please stop. But Boyd was too furious to stop. You're going to regret this, Viola, he growled. I swear you'll regret it. With these words, he threw the check on the floor and sprinted out of the room. A moment later, we heard the front door slam, and then his car started up and drove off with a screech of tires. Renee sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Mom? Her voice was broken. What are we going to do now? I sat down next to her and hugged her like I used to do when she was little and scared. We'll manage, darling, I said quietly. We always manage, but deep down I knew this was just the beginning. Boyd wasn't the type to give up easily, especially when money was involved, and my daughter was always too weak to stand up to him. I was ready to fight, for me, for Renee, and for Perry. I would not let Boyd destroy our family with his greed and irresponsibility. I spent the night in the guest room of Renee's house. I couldn't leave her alone like that. She sobbed until 2 in the morning, then accusing Boyd of lying, then me of ruining her family. An emotional swing I'd witnessed far too often in her life. At one point, she even begged me to give the money to Boyd, believing his promises that this time it would work out. He's trying, Mom, she sobbed, sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes reddened with tears. You just don't see how hard every success is for him. What success, Renee? I asked softly. Name one real success Boyd has had in your 20 years of marriage. She opened her mouth but couldn't say anything. Her face contorted with another wave of sobs. You never loved him, she finally squeezed out. You never gave him a chance. I took a deep breath. It was a song I'd heard many times. Whenever I expressed reasonable doubts about Boyd's business plans or his promises, Renee accused me of being biased. I tried, Renee. I tried to see the best in him for you, but he's proven himself time and time again to be untrustworthy. And now that it turns out he mortgaged your house without your knowledge and borrowed money from dubious individuals, you're still defending him? She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. You don't understand, she whispered. You never did. In the morning, Boyd came home. I heard his car door slam and I tensed, preparing for another round of confrontation. But when he walked into the kitchen, where Renee and I were eating breakfast in silence, he looked very different from yesterday. Anger had been replaced by a cold calm that I knew was far more dangerous. Renee, he said, ignoring my presence, we need to talk, alone. My daughter looked at me uncertainly, then stood up. Of course, Boyd. They left for the living room, closing the door tightly behind them. I remained seated at the kitchen table, slowly sipping the long-cooled tea and trying not to listen to the muffled voices from behind the door. 15 minutes later, they returned. Boyd looked smug, and Renee looked devastated but determined. Mom, she began, not looking me in the eye. Boyd and I talked it over, and we think you should give us at least half the money from the sale of the house. I stared at her, not believing my ears. After everything you found out yesterday? After finding out that he lied to you about your finances, mortgaged the house without your knowledge, borrowed from some thugs? You still want me to give him the money? Not to him, to us. Renee finally looked up, a strange determination in her eyes. It's our money as much as it is yours. Papa would want you to take care of your family. The mention of Harold was a blow below the belt. Renee knew how painful his absence was for me. Don't you dare talk about what your father would have wanted. My voice shook with anger. Harold had never trusted Boyd precisely because he'd seen right through him, saw his selfishness, his irresponsibility, his willingness to risk your future for his own ambition. Boyd grinned. Harold had never understood business. He was a simple engineer who'd worked for one company all his life. What right did he have to judge me? I felt the blood rush to my face with rage. My husband was smart enough to provide us with everything we needed without going into debt or cheating our loved ones. He created the financial security for us that you're trying to destroy now. Security? Boyd laughed, but there was no mirth in his laugh. You know what gives real security in this world, Viola. Not saving for a rainy day, but the ability to take risks when you need to, seeing opportunities and seizing them. And how many of your risky ventures have paid off, Boyd? I looked him right in the eye. How many of your opportunities have actually paid off? None. But you've managed to drive my daughter into debt that she'll be paying off for years. Renee suddenly slammed her palm on the table. That's enough. Stop talking like I'm not here. Her voice was ringing with tension. I'm not a stupid girl, Mama. I know Boyd has made mistakes, but he's my husband, and I stand by his side. I stared at my daughter, feeling something shatter inside. Even now, even after everything she'd learned, she was choosing him. Renee, I tried to speak calmly. I'm not trying to make you choose between me and Boyd. I just want you to be safe, financially secure, and I'm still willing to help you pay off your mortgage, but on the condition that the money goes to that and not to Boyd's next venture. No. Renee shook her head. You're trying to control us. I always have. You never believed in us, in our ability to make our own decisions. That's not true. Yes, it is. Her voice has risen. You look down on us. You think you know better. But this is our life, Mom, and it's up to us to decide how we use the money you owe us. I felt a wave of bitterness rise up inside me. I don't owe you anything, Renee, I said quietly. That money is mine and Harold's. We worked for it, saved it all our lives, and I'm not going to let Boyd squander it to pay off debts he made himself. Boyd stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. You selfish old woman, all you think about is yourself. What about Perry? She has to pay for college. She's got her whole life ahead of her. But you don't care about your own granddaughter. That hit me where it hurts. Perry was my joy, my pride. I loved her more than anything in the world. Don't you dare use Perry in this conversation. My voice turned icy. I've always cared for her, and I'll continue to care for her. But that money isn't going in your pocket, Boyd. Not ever. I stood up, feeling the conversation was over. My gaze met Renee's, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, a cold determination bordering on hostility. If you leave now, she said quietly, don't come back. I froze, unable to believe my ears. My own daughter was walking me out the door. Renee, my voice shook. You don't know what you're doing. No, Mom. She straightened up. You're the one who doesn't understand. You've always thought I was weak, dependent on Boyd. But I'm making this decision on my own. I'm choosing my family, my real family. I felt my eyes fill with tears, but I held them back. Not now, not in front of them. Okay, I gathered my things. I'll leave. But know, Renee, that my door will always be open to you. Always. Boyd grinned, but Renee didn't answer. She just turned away, showing that the conversation was over. I left the house with a heavy heart, feeling something important in my life crumbling. But I couldn't go along with Boyd. I couldn't let him squander the money that was my old age insurance, not even for Renee. Back in my new apartment, I finally let myself burst into tears. Grief flooded my head. I'd lost my daughter, maybe not forever, but now, when I needed her support so badly, she'd chosen Boyd. The next day, Perry called. Grandma. Her voice was worried. What's going on? Dad called me yesterday, saying some strange things about you. That you refused to help us, that you wanted to keep all the money, even though you know I have to pay for college. I sighed. So Boyd had already started his campaign to smear me. Perry, honey, that's not true. I offered your parents the money to pay off the mortgage, but your father wanted the full amount for his business. And also, I hesitated, not wanting to involve Perry in her parents' financial problems. There are some circumstances you don't know about. Your father's gotten into a lot of debt. I know, Grandma. Her voice grew quieter. He told me. He said you could have saved us, but you refused. And now we could lose the house. I felt anger boiling up inside. Boyd had not only used Perry as a pawn in his game, but he'd shifted the responsibility for his mistakes onto me. Perry, listen to me, I tried to say calmly. Your house is in danger not because of me, but because of your father's decisions. He put the house up for a second mortgage without your mother's knowledge, borrowed money from people he'd rather not deal with. And now that those debts need to be paid back, he wants to use my money. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you sure? Perry finally asked. Did Mom know about this? No, I sighed. She only found out the day before yesterday when I told her. And what did she say? At first, she was shocked, but then I hesitated. Your mom's always been on your dad's side, Perry. Always believed him no matter what. And she does now? After she found out he'd lied to her? Yes, I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. She chose his side, told me to leave and not come back. Perry groaned softly. I'm so sorry, Grandma. You don't have to be, dear. I've known for a long time that one day this might happen. Your mother, she was never strong, always looking for someone to make decisions for her. First it was me and your grandfather, then it was your father. What are you going to do now? Perry asked. Move on. I tried to put some pep in my voice. My apartment's almost set up. I'm going to get used to a new place, a new life. What about Mom and Dad? I paused, thinking about how to answer. Your mom will always be my daughter, Perry. I love her no matter what. But I can't let your father manipulate me or use me. If she wants to reconcile, my door is always open. But not without Boyd's conditions. I understand, Perry said quietly. I'll talk to her. Maybe she'll listen to me. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. You're a good girl, Perry, but don't put yourself in a difficult position because of us. These are our problems, and we have to deal with them. But you're my family, she said firmly, all of you, and I can't just stand by when you fight. After talking to Perry, I felt a little better. At least she understood me, didn't judge me for deciding to protect my finances from Boyd. Over the next week, I fully immersed myself in setting up my new apartment. It helped take my mind off of Renee, her rejection, the choices she'd made, everything arranged, every picture hung, every book that took its place on the shelf was a small step toward a new life. The apartment in Pinewood Gardens was even better than I expected. It was bright, spacious, with large windows and a cozy balcony overlooking a small park. The complex had a pool, a gym, and a recreation room where residents could gather for various activities. Most of the residents were about my age. Many were also widows and widowers seeking comfort and security in their final years. I quickly got to know the neighbors. Alice, an octogenarian former teacher who lived a floor above, invited me to a weekly book club. Frank, a 75-year-old retired military man, offered to show me around the neighborhood and told me about the best places to shop and walk. Life was starting to get better, although the pain of separating from my daughter was still lingering. Every night I thought about her, wondering how she was doing, wondering what was going on in their home. I dialed her number a few times, but each time I dropped the call, hesitant to break her ban. Perry had visited me twice this week, each time bringing me news about my parents. The news was disappointing. Daddy's really mad at you, Grandma, she said on the second visit, helping me sort through old photo albums. Telling anyone who's willing to listen that you stole from our family, that you left me without an education and them without a roof over their heads. I grinned bitterly. Do a lot of people believe it? Some. Perry looked embarrassed. Mostly people who don't know you personally. His friends' parents, some neighbors. He'd even said it to my university friends' parents at the last PTA meeting. I shook my head, feeling a mixture of anger and fatigue. Boyd always had a knack for presenting himself as a victim of circumstance, never took responsibility for his mistakes. I know, Perry frowned, and the worst part is that Mom supports him in this. She sits beside him nodding, sometimes even adding details to his stories. It's like she really believes you did them an injustice. I felt my heart clench with pain. It was one thing to have Boyd and his lies, and quite another to have my own daughter involved in this campaign against me. She's always been on his side, I said quietly. Always believed him more than she believed me or your grandfather, even when his lies were obvious. But why? Perry looked genuinely puzzled. Why would she believe him so blindly, I wondered. It was a question I'd been asking myself for years. I think it's because it's easier for her, I finally answered. It's easier to believe that everything will be all right than to admit that she made a mistake in marrying him. It's easier to believe his promises than to face the truth and make a change. Your mom was always afraid of change, Perry. always looking for stability, even if that stability was an illusion. Perry was silent for a long time, pondering my words. It's sad, she said at last. Living in an illusion, afraid to face the truth. Yes, I sighed. Very sad. We continued going through the albums, stopping occasionally to look at a photograph, to remember a story about it. One picture was of little Renee, about 5 years old, with two pigtails and a wide smile revealing her missing front teeth. She was such a happy little girl, I said, running my finger over the photo. So open, trusting, maybe too trusting. Do you miss her? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Every day, I didn't hide it. She's my only daughter, Perry. Despite everything that's happened, I love her. I always will. Perry hugged me, and I felt tears come to my eyes. No matter how strong I tried to be, the pain of breaking up with my daughter was too deep to hide. She'll come around, Grandma, Perry said with a confidence I didn't feel. Sooner or later, she would see the truth. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I wanted to believe it, but I knew Renee too well. Knew her ability to turn a blind eye to inconvenient truths, especially when those truths involved Boyd. In the meantime, Perry pulled away and looked into my eyes. You have me. I'll never turn my back on you, Grandma. I'll never believe Daddy's lies about you. I hugged my granddaughter, feeling immense gratitude for her presence in my life. In that moment, I realized that despite the bitterness of Renee's betrayal, I still have a family. I have Perry, and that is enough to keep on living, to find joy in each day. Thank you, darling, I whispered. You have no idea how much it means to me. When Perry left, I stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the park below, where elderly couples strolled along the paths, holding hands, and lonely old people sat on benches watching the children on the playground. Life went on, with all its joys and sorrows. And my life went on too, despite the pain of being separated from my daughter. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I was ready to face it with the same determination with which I had lived all the previous 74 years. I had stood my ground after Harold's death, and I would stand my ground now. And Renee. Time would tell if she would ever see the truth through the illusion Boyd had so skillfully created around her. It's been 3 weeks since the day Renee kicked me out of her house. 3 weeks without a single call from my daughter, without a text message, without any attempt to repair our relationship. I tried not to think about it, keeping myself busy setting up the apartment, getting to know my neighbors, taking regular walks in the nearby park. But the pain of estrangement persisted. Perry visited me secretly from my parents. She told me that Boyd had forbidden any contact with me, calling me a greedy old woman who had ruined their family. Renee, as usual, obeyed her husband's wishes, though Perry could see the longing and doubt in her eyes. That afternoon, I went to the Riverside Mall to buy a few things for the house. I needed new curtains for the bedroom and kitchen, as well as some dishes. In the rush of the move, I had left many items in the old house. I didn't expect to meet Perry there. We bumped into each other in the home textiles department, and both of us froze for a moment in surprise. Grandma! She looked around quickly, as if afraid we might be seen together, then stepped forward and hugged me tightly. Perry, darling, I responded happily to the hug. What a pleasant surprise. What are you doing here? I had to get something for my psychology project. She pointed to the bag in her hand. And you? Choosing curtains. I pointed to the fabric swatches I was holding. The new apartment had bigger windows than the old house. We stood looking at each other, and I noticed that Perry looked tired, even haggard. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before, and her shoulders looked as if they were slumped under a heavy weight. Perry, I lowered my voice, are you all right? You look tired. She tried to smile, but it was a strained smile. I'm fine, Grandma. It's just a lot of studying. a part-time job at the cafe, and at home. She hesitated. Things haven't been very peaceful at home lately either. I felt anxious. Let's sit down somewhere and talk, I suggested. I'll buy you a coffee. Perry looked away again, but nodded. Okay, but not for long. I have to get home before my mom gets home from work. We found a small cafe in the corner of the mall, ordered coffee, and sat at a table in the far corner where we weren't likely to be seen. Tell me. I covered my granddaughter's hand with mine. What's going on at home? Perry took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. It's really bad, Grandma. Dad's even more nervous and aggressive. He's always yelling at Mom, blaming her for not being able to convince you to give the money. Sometimes I hear him throwing things in their bedroom. I felt my insides clench with anxiety. Did he didn't raise his hand to her? No. Perry shook her head. At least, not that I've seen. But the atmosphere is awful. Mom walks around like a shadow, trying to stay out of his sight. And when they're together, she agrees with everything he says, even if it's bullshit. I nodded. It was typical of Renee to avoid confrontation at all costs. And his business? How's the company doing? It's getting worse. Perry lowered her eyes. As far as I understand from the conversations I overheard, they're on the verge of bankruptcy. Two major clients canceled at the last minute, and now they don't have the money to pay their employees. What about the debts? The ones you told me about earlier? Perry looked around nervously, as if afraid we might be overheard. Those men came to our house, she whispered. Two men, very unpleasant-looking men. I was in my room, but I heard them threatening Dad, saying something about interest and deadlines. Dad assured them he'd get it all back soon, that he had a plan. I felt a chill run down my spine. This was even worse than I'd imagined. Perry, it's dangerous. I squeezed her hand tighter. If these people are really who I think they won't wait forever. I know, her voice shook. That's why I'm so worried. For my mom, for myself, even my dad, even though he's the one to blame for the situation. What about Renee? Does she know about these visits? No. Perry grinned bitterly. Dad told her they were clients, discussing a new project, and she believed it, as usual. Even when I tried to hint to her that something was wrong, she brushed it off, said I was being too paranoid. We fell silent, each immersed in her own thoughts. I thought about how vulnerable my daughter had become in her blind trust in Boyd. It was as if she'd shut off critical thinking when it came to her husband, choosing to believe his lies rather than admit the unpleasant truth. Grandmother, Perry broke the silence. There's something else I have to tell you. Yeah, I've been secretly communicating with you all this time, despite my parents' prohibition. I looked at her in surprise. What do you mean, darling? I know you've been visiting me. No, I mean that Dad explicitly forbade me any contact with you. He said if he found out I was seeing you or calling you, he'd stop paying for my college tuition. I felt anger rising inside. Boyd was not only turning Renee against me, but he was trying to deprive me of any contact with my only granddaughter. And you're risking your education to see me? Perry smiled, this time genuinely. You're my grandmother. You've always been there for me when I needed you. I'm not going to turn my back on you just because Daddy said so. I felt my eyes fill with tears. In a world where my own daughter had rejected me, Perry's love and devotion was like a ray of light in the darkness. Thank you, sweetheart. I squeezed her hand. But I don't want you to jeopardize your future for me. Don't worry. Perry leaned closer. I'm careful, and I've already found a part-time job that will help me pay for part of my schooling on my own in case Dad does stop paying. I shook my head. My granddaughter was only 19, and she should be focusing on her studies, not worrying about how to pay for college. Perry, I can't let you sacrifice your education over this situation. She shrugged her shoulders. I don't have a choice, Grandma. If Dad finds out I'm socializing with you, he'll stop paying for college for sure. It's his way of controlling me, just like he controls Mom. At that moment, a decision matured in my mind. I couldn't let Boyd's ambition and anger ruin my granddaughter's future. Perry, I leaned closer. What if I secretly helped you pay for college? No one has to know about it, not your parents or anyone else. Perry's eyes widened. Would you do that for me? Of course, I smiled. You're my granddaughter. I want you to have the best education, the best future, and I won't let Boyd use your education as leverage. Perry looked shocked. But, it's a lot of money, Grandma, and you said you needed money for your own needs, for medical expenses. I have enough, I said with a wave of my hand. Harold had always been a prudent man. We were well prepared for old age. And then, I smiled, what could be a better investment than my granddaughter's education? Perry looked at me, her eyes glistening with tears. I don't know what to say, Grandma. It means so much to me. You don't have to say anything, dear. Just promise me you'll study hard. That's all I need. I promise. She squeezed my hand tightly. I won't let you down. We began to discuss the details. I explained that I could open a special account that would pay for her studies. We decided that she would tell her parents she got a scholarship or grant if they started asking why the tuition bills weren't coming in. But what if Dad wants to see the scholarship papers? Perry asked. I wondered. Boyd was suspicious enough to demand proof. My lawyer, Mr. Foley, can help with that, I finally said. He can prepare documents that will look official. Not a forgery, just a creative rendering of the real situation. Perry nodded, but looked worried. Grandma, what if Daddy finds out anyway? What if he somehow finds out you're helping me? I thought for a moment. Then we'll deal with the problem as it arises. But I doubt he'll find out. Boyd is too busy with his own problems to scrutinize the details of your training. Perry nodded, but I could see she was still worried. There's something else, she said quietly. Daddy had started drinking, not just a glass of wine at dinner, but real drinking. Every night he comes home with a bottle of whiskey or vodka, locks himself in his study, and only comes out when the bottle is empty. I sighed. The situation was getting worse. How's Renee reacting? She doesn't. Perry shook her head. She pretended not to notice. Cooks him dinner that he often doesn't eat. Washes his clothes that smell like alcohol and cigarettes. Sometimes I hear her crying in the bathroom at night. But when I ask if everything is okay, she says she's just tired. My heart squeezed with pain for my daughter. Despite our fight, despite her choice to side with Boyd, I couldn't help but worry about her. Perry, I said slowly, choosing my words. If things get dangerous at home, if you feel you or Mom are in danger, promise me you'll call me right away. Any time of the day or night, I'll come and get you both. Perry nodded. I promise, Grandma, but I don't think he's never been physically violent. People change, I said softly, especially under pressure, and especially when they abuse alcohol. Just be careful, okay? Okay. She glanced at her watch and shuddered. I have to go now, Grandma. Mom will be home soon. We stood up and I hugged my granddaughter tightly, not wanting to let go. Take care of yourself, dear, and remember that my door is always open to you, always. When Perry left, I sat in the cafe for a long time, thinking about our conversation. The situation at Renee's house was worse than I'd imagined. Not only was Boyd mired in debt, but he'd started drinking, making him even more unstable and potentially dangerous. And my daughter, as always, preferred to turn a blind eye to the problem instead of looking for a solution. But now, at least I knew what was going on. And most importantly, I could help Perry with her education, securing the future Boyd had threatened to take away from her. The next day, I met with Mr. Foley, my lawyer, and explained the situation. He listened carefully, making occasional notes in his notebook. "Mrs. Morrow," he said when I had finished, "what you are proposing is perfectly legal. You have every right to help your granddaughter financially, but keeping it from her parents, it could cause serious problems if they found out." "I understand," I nodded, "but I don't have a choice. Boyd is using Perry's education as leverage. I can't let him ruin her future because of his resentment toward me." Mr. Foley tapped his pen thoughtfully on his notepad. "We could set up a trust fund," he finally said. "A fund that would pay money directly to the university for Perry's tuition. It would look like a scholarship or grant from a private benefactor. Technically, it wouldn't even be a lie. You really are a private benefactor funding a student's education." I nodded, feeling relieved. "That sounds perfect, Mr. Foley. How quickly can we get this organized?" "I can have the paperwork ready by the end of the week." He made a note on his calendar. "Then it'll take a few more days to finalize all the legal aspects. Let's say in 10 days, everything will be ready." "Thank you." I smiled sincerely. "You have no idea how important this is to me." "I can guess, Mrs. Morrow." His eyes warmed. "Family is the most precious thing we have, even when they break our hearts." Walking out of the lawyer's office, I felt calmer. The plan was a good one, well thought out. Perry would be able to continue her education without the fear that Boyd would suddenly refuse to pay for college. I could give my granddaughter this gift, the gift of knowledge and future opportunities. On the way home, I reflected on Renee. How does she feel now? Does she regret her choice? Or had she convinced herself, as she always did, that everything would be all right, that Boyd would find a way out, that his promises would come true this time? I wanted so badly to talk to her, to explain that I still loved her, that she could always come back to me if the situation with Boyd became unbearable, but I knew she wasn't ready to listen. Not ready to admit that she'd made a mistake in choosing his side. At home, I pulled out an old photo album and found a picture taken when Renee was 16. She was standing next to me at her high school graduation, proud and happy, with an academic medal around her neck. She had the same determination and intelligence in her eyes that I now saw in Perry's eyes. Where had that girl disappeared to? When did she turn into a woman so dependent on her husband's approval that she was willing to deny her own mother for his whims? Maybe I missed something in her upbringing. Did Harold and I push her too hard, expect too much? Or maybe we'd spoiled her too much by not teaching her to stand on her own 2 feet. I couldn't stop thinking about it, but I knew this was no time for self-recrimination. Now was the time to support Perry, to keep her safe and give her the future she deserved. And Renee. Renee had to find her own way. I could only hope that one day she would see Boyd for who he really was, a selfish, irresponsible man whose ambition and pride were more important than the well-being of his own family. I texted Perry that night, telling her about my meeting with the lawyer and the trust fund plan. Her reply was full of gratitude and relief. "Thank you, Grandma. You have no idea how much this means to me. I won't let you down. I promise. I love you." Those words warmed my heart. Despite all the hardships, despite the estrangement with my daughter, despite Boyd's lies and manipulations, I still had Perry a smart, strong, loving granddaughter who wasn't afraid to stand up to me, even when it meant standing up to her own parents. And for her sake, I was willing to do anything, even secret financial schemes and tricks that I would normally find unacceptable. For Perry and her future, I was willing to compromise my principles, because sometimes protecting the ones we love requires unconventional decisions and unconventional actions. With those thoughts in mind, I went to bed feeling strangely peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I knew for sure that I was doing the right thing, and this knowledge was like a balm for my tortured soul. The year went by without a hitch. I got used to life in my new apartment, made friends among my neighbors, and regularly participated in the activities of our apartment complex. Twice a week, I attended a watercolor painting class at the local community center, a hobby I'd always wanted to take up but had never found the time for. Perry visited me regularly, though she still did so in secret from my parents. Thanks to the trust fund I'd set up with Mr. Foley's help, she continued her studies without fear that Boyd would suddenly refuse to pay for college. Her grades were excellent, and she even began working part-time as a research assistant in the psychology department's research lab, a job that was not only a source of extra income, but also valuable professional experience. I hadn't been in touch with Renee all this time. I tried to call her a few times for her birthday, for Christmas, but she wouldn't return my calls. I knew from Perry that the situation in their family continued to deteriorate. Boyd's business was finally failing, debts were mounting, and his addiction to alcohol was only adding to the problems. I tried not to interfere, though my heart was breaking with worry for my daughter. Renee had made her choice, and I had to honor it, no matter how painful it was for me. That day, exactly a year and 2 weeks after our fight, I was working in the small garden on my balcony, planting new flowers in pots. Spring was in full swing, and I was enjoying the warm sunshine and the scent of fresh earth. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and Perry usually gave me advance notice of her visits. I wiped my hands on my apron, wondering who it could be. When I opened the door, I froze in amazement. Renee stood on the doorstep, pale and gaunt, her eyes red with tears. "Mom?" Her voice was barely audible. I didn't immediately know what to say. A year of separation, a year of silence, and here she stood before me, looking so lost and broken that my heart ached. "Renee." I finally found my voice. "Come in, please." She crossed the threshold hesitantly, as if she was afraid I might change my mind and kick her out the door. I led her into the living room, where she sank down on the couch, wrapping her arms around herself as if she were cold, despite the warm spring day. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, not knowing where to start the conversation. She nodded, and I went into the kitchen, giving us both time to collect our thoughts. When I returned with 2 cups of tea, Renee was still sitting in the same position, staring at the same spot in front of her. "What's wrong?" I asked softly, sitting down next to her. Renee looked up at me, and I saw such deep pain and despair in her eyes that it took my breath away for a moment. "Boyd's gone," she said quietly. "Packed up and left. 2 weeks ago." I held back a sigh of relief. Despite everything I thought about Boyd, I knew it was a tragedy for Renee to see him go. "I'm sorry, honey." I placed my hand gently on her shoulder. "No, you're not." She grinned bitterly. "You always hated him. You always knew he was—" Her voice trailed off. "It's not about hate, Renee," I said softly. "I just saw what you refused to see. I saw how he manipulated you, how he used your love and trust." She didn't answer, just wrapped her arms around herself tighter. "Tell me what happened," I asked. Renee took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. "His company went bankrupt," she began. "Finally, the debts were too big, the customers too few. The creditors started threatening to sue. And then," she swallowed, "then those people showed up. The ones you were talking about a year ago, the thugs that Boyd borrowed money from. They came to our house, threatened him, me, even Perry. I felt my blood run cold. It was exactly what I was afraid of." "Did they hurt you?" I asked, watching her face anxiously. "No." Renee shook her head. "They just threatened me. Said if Boyd didn't get the money back in a week, it would come back. And next time, they wouldn't be so polite." I breathed out a sigh of relief. At least she wasn't physically hurt. "And what did Boyd do?" "Panicked at first. Drank more than usual, yelled at me, Blamed me for all his problems, Renee said in a monotone, as if she were recounting the plot of a movie rather than the events of her life. And then, on Thursday, I woke up to find his things gone. He'd left a note on the kitchen table. He said he needed a fresh start, that he was leaving town, maybe the state, that I'd be better off without him. I listened without interrupting, letting her talk. He took my credit card, Renee continued. He took out the entire limit, $15,000, and left me with all my debts, all the bills, the mortgage we hadn't paid in 3 months, the loans he'd racked up to grow his business, even the money he'd borrowed from those people. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to realize the magnitude of the disaster. Boyd hadn't just walked away, he'd robbed his own wife, leaving her to deal with the consequences of his irresponsible behavior. How much do you owe? I asked quietly. Renee shook her head. I don't even know exactly. Probably about $300,000 if you count all the loans and mortgages. And those people, Boyd borrowed $50,000 from them. With interest, that's about 70. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me at Boyd. How could he do this to a woman who loved him, trusted him, sacrificed everything for him? What about Perry? Does she know? Yes, Renee sighed. She was home when I found the note. She didn't seem surprised. Said she was expecting something like this. That didn't surprise me. Perry always saw right through Boyd. Even as a kid, she'd inherited my ability to recognize lies and manipulation. Mom, Renee's voice trembled. I don't know what to do. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the house. Those people said they'd be back in a week. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I'm terrified. She finally looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before, a complete admission of defeat. I was wrong, she whispered. You were right about him all along. And I was so stupid, so blind, and as a result, I lost everything. My house, my savings, my husband, and you. Her voice broke on the last word. I moved closer and put my arms around her. She clung to me, the way she used to do when she was scared or upset as a child, and burst into tears. I stroked her back, whispering words of comfort as her body shook with sobs. It's going to be okay, I said. We'll get through this. Together. When she finally calmed down, I pulled away and looked into her eyes. What do you want from me, Renee? I asked her bluntly. She lowered her gaze. I know I have no right to ask. Her voice was barely audible, especially after the way I treated you. But I have no one else to turn to, Mom. I need your help, financial help. I nodded. That's what I expected. How much? At least enough to pay off those people. She fidgeted with the hem of her blouse. They're the most dangerous. The rest I can take care of gradually. Maybe sell the house, get a better job. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the park below. Part of me wanted to help my daughter immediately, to take away the fear and uncertainty. But the other part realized that the easy solution wasn't always the best. Renee had spent her whole life relying on others, first Harold and I, then Boyd. Maybe it was time she learned to stand on her own 2 feet. Renee, I turned to her. I'm not giving you the money. Her face contorted with shock and disappointment. But Mom, you heard? Those people. They're dangerous. I know. I held up my hand to stop her. And I'm not going to leave you to deal with this alone, but I won't give you money for nothing. She looked at me with a look of incomprehension. What do you mean? I came back and sat down next to her. I suggest you move in with me temporarily. There's plenty of room for both of us. I'll help you with your debts, but on the condition that you find a good job that suits your education and abilities, and you'll pay off those debts yourself, from your salary. I'll be just a safety net to keep you off the streets. Renee looked puzzled. But it would take years. I'll never have enough money to pay it all off. You'll be surprised what you can do when you really try. I spoke firmly. You're a smart woman, Renee. You have a good education. You've just never used your full potential because you've always relied on someone else. She lowered her eyes, clearly hurt by my words, but not arguing with them. What about those people? They're not going to wait for me to get a job and start paying off my debt. I'll deal with them, I said. Mr. Foley, my lawyer, has connections with the police. We'll report the extortion. Believe me, these people won't want trouble with the law. They'd rather forget about Boyd's debt than go to jail. Renee didn't look too convinced, but she nodded. What about the house? We'll sell it, I answered. We'll use the money to pay off the mortgage and some of the other debts. The rest you'll pay off over time. Do you really think I can do that? There was doubt in her voice. I know you can. I took her hand in mine. You're stronger than you think, Renee. Stronger than Boyd let you be. This is your chance to prove it. To yourself, to me, to Perry. Everyone. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see fear and hope, uncertainty and determination struggling in her eyes. All right, she said at last. I'll agree to your terms. I'll get a job. I'll pay off my debts. Yeah, I'll try to be stronger. I smiled and squeezed her hand. That's good. We'll start a new chapter, Renee, together. That night, I called Perry and told her about her mother's visit and our agreement. Are you sure, Grandma? Perry's voice sounded concerned. It's a big responsibility to take Mom in, to help her with her debts. I'm sure, I answered. She's my daughter, Perry. No matter what, I love her and I want to help her, but I also want her to learn to handle life on her own, without Boyd or anyone else making decisions for her. You think she can do that? I could hear the doubt in Perry's voice. Mom's always been, dependent, always needed someone to tell her what to do. I think she could surprise us both, I said. She doesn't have a choice. Sometimes it's in situations like this that we discover strength we didn't realize we had. Perry was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you two made up, she said finally. It's been such a strange year hiding from my mom that I was seeing you, lying about the scholarship. You won't have to do that anymore. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. We'll be a family again, a real family without secrets and manipulation. What about Dad? Perry asked quietly. Do you think he'll come back? I wondered. Boyd was always unpredictable. I don't know, honey, but if he comes back, we'll be ready. And this time, your mom won't be alone. The next day, Renee moved in with me. She brought only the bare necessities, clothes, personal items, a few pictures of Perry as a child. Everything else stayed in the house, which would soon be sold. I showed her the guest bedroom I'd prepared for her, a bright room overlooking the park, with a comfortable bed and a desk by the window. This is your room now, I said. You can make it your own. Renee looked around the room with a strange mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. Thank you, Mom. She lowered her eyes. For everything. I know I don't deserve your kindness after the way I treated you. You're my daughter. I put my hand on her shoulder. That's enough. That evening, Renee and I sat on the balcony, watching the sun set over the park with Perry, who had come over for dinner. It was a warm spring evening, and the air was filled with the scent of blossoming trees. We were drinking wine, talking, reminiscing about the past, the good times, before Boyd, when we were just a happy family, grandmother, mother, and daughter. You know, Perry said, looking at her mother, I think this is a new beginning for all of us. Renee smiled weakly. I hope you're right, dear. I'm so tired of everything. Of the lies, of the fear, of the constant feeling that I'm not good enough. You've always been good enough, I said softly. It's just that you let Boyd convince you otherwise. Renee nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I wasted 20 years of my life on a man who never really loved me. Her voice shook. A man who used me, manipulated me, and then abandoned me when things got hard. How could I have been so blind? Love makes us blind, I answered. They makes us believe what we want to believe, see what we want to see. It's not just about love, Renee shook her head. It's about fear. I was afraid to be alone, afraid to make decisions, afraid to living my life. But you're not afraid now? Perry asked. Renee thought for a moment. I am, she finally admitted. Yes, I am. But it's a different kind of fear now. Not paralyzing, but motivating. I'm afraid, but I know I have to move forward despite the fear. I looked at my daughter with pride. Maybe, after all, she really is stronger than I thought. So, Perry raised her glass. Here's to a new beginning, to a life without toxic people and toxic relationships. We clinked glasses, and I felt a warmth spill inside, not just from the wine, but from the realization that despite all the trials, we were still a family. Not perfect, broken, but still a family. You know what I'm thinking? Renee said after a pause. That dad would be happy to see us now, together, supporting each other. I nodded, feeling a lump come up in my throat. Harold had always believed in the power of family, always said that together we could weather any storm. I remember, Renee smiled through her tears. He used to say, "The Morrows don't give up." Exactly, I raised my glass. To Harold, and to the Morrows who never give up. To the Morrows, Renee and Perry echoed. At that moment, looking at my daughter and granddaughter, I felt a strange peace. Yes, there are still many challenges ahead. Renee will have to find a job, pay off debts, learn to live without Boyd. I have to learn to trust my daughter, who betrayed me once before. We all have to adjust to new dynamics, new roles, new lives. But we'll get through it, because we're family, because we're the Morrows, and the Morrows really don't give up. You know, Mom, Renee said, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. I never told you this, but I've always admired you. Your strength, your independence. I just, didn't think I could be the same. You can be anything you want to be, Renee. I smiled at her. It's never too late to start over. Do you think I'll ever be able to make it up to you? Her voice was full of doubt. After everything I've done, after I turned my back on you when you needed me, I wondered, was there room in my heart for complete forgiveness? Could I forget the pain of rejection, the disappointment of her betrayal? I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were before, I said honestly. Some wounds heal, leaving scars. But I know I love you, Renee, and I'm ready to try to build something new, something based on mutual respect and understanding, not just a sibling bond. Renee nodded, accepting my answer. I'm ready too, Mom, and I promise I won't let you down this time. I didn't say I believed her, because the truth was I didn't know if I could fully trust her promises. Too many times she'd chosen Boyd over me. Too long she'd let him control her decisions. But I was willing to give her a chance to prove that she'd changed, that the lessons of this painful year hadn't gone to waste. Day by day, I said, looking at her with a soft smile. Let's move forward day by day. Perry put her hands on our shoulders, bringing us all together in one hug. We'll get through this, she said with a confidence I envied. Together, we can handle anything. And in that moment, under a starry spring sky, with my daughter and granddaughter by my side, I felt she was right. Whatever the future brought, new trials, new challenges, perhaps even Boyd's return, we would face it together. Stronger, wiser, and ready to protect each other from whatever storms life might bring. It wasn't a happy ending from a fairy tale. Renee still had a long recovery ahead of her, not just financially, but emotionally. I had to learn to trust again a daughter who had already broken my heart once before with her choices. We both had to build a new relationship based not on dependency and resentment, but on mutual respect and understanding. But it was a beginning, a new beginning for all of us. And for the first time in a long time, I looked to the future with hope instead of fear.